And thank you very much, Krister, for inviting me to be here at this conference. Actually, it's kind of funny for me to be here in Sweden to talk to you about sustainability. It seems like I'm the student trying to tell the teacher what sustainability is. And that is, of course, I think that the only reason I'm here is because I have the distinction of coming from the country that has the city with the highest congestion in the world, and that is Mexico City. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how Podtrains can help sustainability. So Podtrains, what are we talking about? We are talking about mass transit systems, okay? Sometimes, well, we've spoken here about Podcars, or pod taxis is a phrase that I have heard in India. Yes, but really we're talking here about mass transit systems, so not really tourist rides or pod taxis, more something that is intended to be mass transit. So they are trains of driverless electric vehicles, but that use a dedicated pathway network. So they're not in mixed traffic. You use them where you really need additional infrastructure, where the existing infrastructure is already completely saturated at peak hours. But they are demand-driven, or the service that they provide is demand-driven, not fixed schedule-driven. So what do they look like? The infrastructure can take many different forms. The design can be optimized or designed in such a way that it fits into the context, but these are some possibilities. And about sustainability, the city manager already mentioned, there are three dimensions to sustainability. The most important one, or the one that we usually think about, is environmental, but there's also economic and social. And between environmental and economic, where these two match, we're talking about solutions that are bearable. Where environmental and social come together, we're talking about solutions that are equitable. And where economic and social come together, we're talking about solutions that are viable. So the combination of those three things give us sustainable. And in urban mobility, we're talking about things like energy consumption, land usage, emissions. Also ridership. Public transit is good when it's actually used, not if it's just circulating with mainly empty vehicles. Efficiency, cost coverage, livability, social integration or cohesion, and dignity. So what do we want? We want cities that are great places to live, such as, for example, you have already some very highly referenced solutions, such as, if I pronounce it correctly, an eco-friendly urban development in Stockholm that is widely referenced as a model for sustainable development. So where there's a balance between the space used for vehicles and for the use by humans, where biking and walking are good mobility options, but mainly where public transportation is as attractive as the private automobile. And that's really what we want to get to. So to understand how Podtrains contribute to sustainability, let's take a look at what some other cities have done in terms of, for example, cable cars, bus rapid transit, and subways and trams. So the first case, a city that was awarded the 2018 Latin American Smart City Award in that category, Sustainable Urban Development and Mobility. It was a solution that provides an alternative to gasoline and diesel buses. It has cut travel time drastically. It has promoted social cohesion in that city, and it has had a major impact on the quality of urban life. And that is the aerial tram in La Paz, Bolivia, the city where I was born and raised and lived for 18 years. This is the city, and these are the figures for that tram system. It has 8 lines, 27 kilometers, 3 additional lines are being planned, 25 stations. It started operation just 4 years ago. The average speed is 18 kilometers per hour, not very much, but given the topography of the city, which has a height differential of 700 meters between the lowest and the highest parts of the city, that has cut down travel times tremendously. And it has a daily ridership of about 200,000 users a day. So it's the first urban transit network to use cable cars. as the backbone of the public transportation network. And you can see there, what I think is relevant for our community here, the Podcar community, is that these are small vehicles with a lean infrastructure, but it's a network, not just a single line. They didn't get the award after implementing the first line. They got the award because it's a network now, and all the passengers are seated. But there are some limitations. It's a very expensive system to put into place. $29 million per kilometer, okay? And the line capacity is only about 3,000 to 4,000 passengers per hour per direction, which means that it's a very high investment for the number of people it's actually moving, okay? Case number 2, the winner of the 2005 Sustainable Transportation Award for being also a significant improvement over the existing or a previous bus system, and that's the bus rapid transit system in Bogotá, Colombia. Huge system, 12 lines, 147 stations. It started operation at the turn of the millennium. Its average speed is 26 kilometers per hour. Daily ridership, 2.2 million users a day. That's more than double of what the Stockholm subway transports every day. It's the largest bus rapid transit network, BRT system worldwide. So, positive things that I see as things that we should be looking towards, or that I think are good things to copy. The speed of implementation, the cost of implementation, much, much lower than a traditional subway system, for example. And it really is mass transit. Most of the stations have passing lanes, which allows even the bus rapid transit system, which has already its own lanes. By having these passing lanes at the stations, they can have express services where even the bus is not stopping at every station. But by design, it has sardine trips, and therefore very low user satisfaction. Number 3, Stockholm subway. I have picked the Stockholm subway just because we're in Sweden. This applies to a lot of subways, but I think the Stockholm subway is also a very, very good subway. You know it better than I do. 7 lines, 100 stations, very high average speed, 39 kilometers per hour. Daily ridership, 900,000, and complemented by the Tvärbanan, yes, the cross line, the crossway line that serves that eco-district of Hammarby. Just that. 1 line, 18 kilometers, 26 stops. Average speed, 20 kilometers per hour. Daily ridership, 77,000. And it operates between 7 and 8 or 10 minutes off peak. So the combination of the subways and the trams, good aspects, speed, also attractive, but also some limitations. All of the stations are the same size, regardless of the demand. You can see the graph on the right-hand side. These are the stations along line 10, okay? One of the stations in the city center has a lot of demand, alighting and boarding passengers. A lot of the other ones don't have that demand. Yet all subway stations need to be the same size to fit the train, right? Also, during the day, most subway stations or subway lines, most transit systems will see that type of behavior. There's a peak demand, and then there's lower demand, and then maybe in the evening a higher demand again. So the trains run the entire length of the corridor, but they are quite empty part of the way. Or the schedules are set up based on averages, old data. So I come to case number 4, the Autotren system, which is a Podtrain system or officially automated transit. This is a projected system, okay? We don't have the contract yet, but we are very far along in the process. So this is one of several projects in Mexico City. This one in particular, a first line, could be 7 kilometers, 12 stations, scheduled to begin operation in 2020, with an average speed of 40 kilometers per hour, 30,000 riders a day, and a frequency of 30 seconds at each station. Okay? Tomorrow I will explain a little bit more about how that is achieved on the technical side, but basically in general the idea is that this one line will bring people to the edge of the city center. It will connect with the bus rapid transit, but it will be prepared to cross the historic center of the city underground. It's also prepared so that we can easily add some small branches off of the main line to get closer to the center of the residential areas that feed the system to go into the center of town. And it will also grow into a larger network over a number of stages. So this is implemented as a public-private partnership where the government invests in the fixed infrastructure and the private industry invests in the rolling stock, the automation, the fare collection, in exchange for being allowed to operate the system for a certain number of years. And the fares have to be competitive with other transit systems, but they're not subsidized. So this brings us to the question, how sustainable is this solution? In terms of energy consumption, these are obviously average figures. There's always ranges, but passenger cars consume about 0.4 kilowatt hours per passenger kilometer. City buses do a much better job. Bus rapid transit, I did not find any data on the internet, but it's probably better than the normal city bus. Urban rail, of course, is much, much better. Rail systems are very efficient. Podtrains are even better. Okay? Urban rail can be as efficient as podtrains, and it is during the peak hours. They're even a little bit better than podtrains in the peak hours because of the number of people in the train. But as soon as you move off peak, they lose that advantage. And podtrains, because of the way they operate, because they are demand-driven, and because they're not operating along a whole corridor all the time, they achieve the better result all the time and are therefore better overall. In terms of speed, during rush hour, passenger cars in congested cities move at around 15 kilometers per hour, buses a little bit less. Bus rapid transit with their own lanes does much better. Subways we already saw, and podtrains much, much faster, so more attractive. In terms of comfort and convenience, podtrains always seated, even in rush hour. So my key messages, number one, podtrains will contribute to sustainability, but they're not a panacea. In my opinion, the people who maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago thought that podcars would solve the world's transportation problems by themselves, I think that they were wrong. And the people that today perhaps think that automated or self-driving or driverless vehicles will solve the world's transportation problems, I think they're also wrong. It really has to do with how you integrate these systems into the entire urban transit network. Number two, podtrains, you look at them and they're very small, and you sometimes see these huge crowds of people and you think that's not going to work. But they do. They do work in that sense that I mentioned. They can extend existing rapid transit networks in large cities, and they can also form the backbone of a system in a medium-sized city. Conventional transit will not be able to stop the incoming tide of automobiles in our cities. But innovative solutions like podtrains, if designed correctly, will. They're a very energy-efficient form of mass transit. They help recover urban spaces that were hijacked by cars and improve social cohesion. And number six, it's never too late to start. Thank you very much.